So we have the three ray types, dominated by fear, dominated by ambition and love of power, frantic desire, and breaking the rules, unscrupulousness. And then we have this type of pursuit of knowledge, intellectual achievement for selfish ends, and the use of knowledge for personality objectives. And there we have the third ray type and what he says, the black magician. You have often been told that fear is an illusion, yet this statement does not help. It is a generalization that one can admit, yet which remains profoundly difficult to apply individually. The fears to which aspirants are subject, note the mode of wording in this. In other words, they are subjected to fear, are seldom of a selfish nature except insofar as suffering has forced them to recoil from a further continuation of untoward happenings. Meaning they hide away from service in which they could be exposed to that which they fear. Their fears are wrapped in seeming love around their loved ones. Notice he uses this word seeming, so he's trying to tell us something. He says most disciples are having the majority of their suffering in connection with their loved ones. Wrapped in seeming suffering around their loved ones, yet each disciple ask himself a most practical question. How many of the torturing hours have been expended on realities and on tangible happenings, and how many on illusory premonitions and on doubts and questionings based on that which never happened? I saw this little question, one of these kind of little bumper stickers of it. What was it you were worried about last year? Of course, these days it's almost possible to answer. The economy, whatever.
But could it be the fear of the unknown?
That also is a very powerful fear.
But in the Cyclic astrology, in the Gemini part, is saying that it's one of the signs of the separation between, or the realization of the separation of the personality and the soul.
Right. That did you say fear of the unknown is?
No fear, because
okay.
First you for the first time you feel that you're not just your personality.
Yes. Well, take a look here. I want to show you this thing.
Surely it's an essential thing, though, isn't it? Fear. I mean, where would we be without it? It can't be all bad.
Well, it sometimes it sometimes saves a person, but usually it prevents their entering into experience which could liberate them. Here are these in white magic, these instincts, and there are always fears connected with the instinct. So it's what the fear can become if it is transmuted. So the instinct for self-preservation leads eventually to immortality, and spiritualistic research is the method. The sex instinct, around which there are many fears, leads to spiritual union and at-one-ment on a higher turn of the spiral, and religion and mysticism lead the way. The herd instinct leads finally to group consciousness, and the practice of brotherhood is the method. This is really interesting. Self-assertion leads to the assertion of the self, or the soul. And the method of making it happen is psychology. And here's the one that I thought, fear of the unknown. the instinct is to inquire, to find out about the unknown, because one fears it, and the intuition reveals it, and education makes the practice of intuition possible. I think this is a very good little table, and it's on page 629 of A Treatise on White Magic. Well, generally, he says that for the entire planet, fear is the major dweller on the threshold. You have to pass through the fear to get into the new state. And it's somehow built into the lunar substance itself. And it is related to the life on the moon chain and what was experienced there. And the animal terror and its effect upon human beings is based upon moon chain relations. So oftentimes if you look at your horoscope, the moon will not only indicate the prison of the soul, but a constellation of certain fears that cause you to recoil away from experience that could help you grow. If you're hiding away, you can't grow. And that's why fear may contribute at times to saving your own neck, but often it keeps you out of the experiences which would expand you, because you're always recoiling. So anyway, but he asks us, are we fearing in vain? How many things are real and how many are just based on illusory premonitions? This could happen, I'm afraid it will happen, but it never happens. I would like to point out to my brothers that they need to do two things. To meditate on truth in daily life using the concept of truth practiced and lived by as their seed thought. And then he suggests this familiar phrase that we certainly are exposed to in the arcane school and in other training. Memorize and use at all times, when swept by illusory fears and needless foreboding, the following formula: let reality govern my every thought and truth be the master of my life. And I know we know this, but probably many of us use this in different ways, but he recommends it under special circumstances. Okay, let each of us say this to himself as constantly as need requires, forcing his mind to focus attention upon the significance of these spoken words. I want to just see how far. Yeah, okay. I want to finish this by this afternoon. Now he's going to tell us about some interesting things here. I would suggest also sound common sense and the cultivation of an attitude of mind which refuses to permit time for illusory fears to grow. You know, the idle hands do the devil's work, and if you just are sitting around, you know, Goethe said something like that, you know, it's something like this, then I'll just paraphrase it loosely. When the devil whispers in your ear, get to work. In other words, you know, when all of the hauntings, forebodings happen, just apply yourself and it will fly. Fear is the main obstacle, frequently. This is where he says, to a very vital step forward which could be taken in this life, but which may have to be delayed to another if due opportunity is not taken and the will nature powerfully excited. Have you ever had that feeling of the will growing in you to the point where the thing that you were afraid to do now can be done because you have this internal excitation which allows you to break through and do it? Like you say, oh, I don't care, I'm just going to do it. You know, fear, I don't care, go. I imagine it's like that when you're skydiving or bungee jumping or something like that. How many here are really dying to go bungee jumping? Dying to go bungee jumping. Have you seen these people up there several hundred feet? And when they jump off the edge, they always scream. It's not them; it's their elemental screaming.
Did you raise your hand?
I just thought
Oh, would you like?
Well, I would do it if I had to. I mean, you know what I mean. If the consequences of not doing it are worse than doing it, then you do it.
Oh.
But that's common sense.
Well,
That's self-preservation.
he says, Master Moria compares fears. He says, well, it's easy not to be afraid of lions if you're faced with fire. So, in other words, there's relative degrees of fear. You'd rather face the lion than face the fire. So I think there are certain circumstances under which I would be willing to jump off and do that. How about you? Let's all go together. Let's have a group party. Bungee jumping party. And I know that some of us will come back. I just know it.
Some of us.
Even in one piece, or maybe two pieces. Two pieces, you know those ropes.
Can you imagine what that does to the brain?
Oh, absolutely.
It's really bad.
You know, and you know what?
It's not worth it.
You get taller. You really do. You get stretched out a bit.
But what? The shape of the brain.
I know.
It's bad.
I don't think it's good.
No.
Next time I'm tempted to do it, I'm going to think of what you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen to Mummy.
That's right. Okay. Now, here we're talking about the failure to overcome our dweller. What happens if we fail to overcome our dweller? This is very interesting. The first-rate aspirant who fails to overcome his dweller may become a destroyer of souls, as it is called, and be condemned until he learns his lesson to work in the forces of matter and with the forms which hold all souls in prison. Now it's hard to understand what he means here, but this is just the opposite of the Manu's work. Because, and similar in many ways. But the Manu does work with the forms which hold the souls in prison, so that the forms will no longer hold the souls in prison. The Manu works at improving those forms, right? Works at improving the forms so that the spirit may become free via the right type of form. But it looks to me like the destroyer of souls tries to keep the soul in prison. That's what it looks like to me. This is the occult significance of the misunderstood words death and destruction. Of this type, the devil is the great prototype. What about is it the 15th card of the tarot?
Yes.
Does the devil have you in chains?
Yes.
And is it so?
Blind.
Yes. And somehow you are deeply embedded in matter, and somehow it's related to the Capricorn card. Is it so?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And is Capricorn not the earthbound soul and keeping us in densest matter, subject to densest matter? So I think we get the idea. The second, what is it?
Like the church, the Catholic Church?
The Catholic Church?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know the astrology of the Catholic Church. He just tells us the rays. But I wouldn't be surprised if Capricorn is not somehow involved. He does tell us that Christianity, however, is ruled by Scorpio. He tells us that.
The first way, the prisoner of souls,
Yes.
that is
Imprison the souls.
yes.
Shall I put down the words Catholic Church with your name after that, in case this gets spread around? Catholic Church.
Mr. Pope might not be happy.
Oh, sorry. I tried to write LG and it said Logoic. Okay, I won't. We'll just say anonymous. Okay. The second ray aspirant who builds his dweller No, remember, the second ray is the building ray. The second ray aspirant who builds his dweller and permits its steady and increasing control becomes a deluder of souls, a false teacher. He is the true Antichrist. And through false teaching and the work of so-called miracles, through hypnotism and mass suggestion, he draws a veil over the world and forces men to walk in the great illusion. Well, there's many types like that today, are there not? They use glamour a lot. And in other words, they are purveyors of glamorous teaching. And in that way, keep men in illusion. It is interesting to note that the work of the devil, the imprisoner of souls, is beginning to lose its power. For the race is on the verge of understanding that true death is immersion in form, and that matter is but a part of the divine whole. The thought form of this dweller on the threshold, which humanity has built for millions of years, is on the verge of destruction. In other words, we will now learn about immortality. That's coming very soon. But the work of the Antichrist, the false teacher, is only rising now to its height. And if you really look out there, there's really some bizarre teachings that people actually believe entirely. And they follow it their whole life long. And where can it possibly lead? Except into what we say, immersion in illusion. Is that what it is? He forces men to walk in the great illusion. Okay.
It's very strange New Age teachings that have
Yeah, exactly.
sort of purporting to be new,
Yeah.
just illusory.
But they're strange. It's to say strange gods, strange gods. Well, look, a lot of people looking at our teaching, they feel the same way, right? But we know. All right. But so this is rising to power now, and the delusion of riches, of possession, of false teaching will increasingly hold sway. But the term of the delusion will be shorter than the term of destruction. It's interesting how he's using the words, because death and destruction is submergence in the form, right? Death and destruction is imprisonment. Imprisonment in form. For all these factors function under their own cycles and have their own ebb and flow, and he's not telling us which. The third-rate person who also fails to shatter, he uses different words. The second-rate type builds his dweller. The third-rate person will fail to shatter his dweller, becomes what is called the manipulator of the souls, and uses the mind to destroy the real and put a veil between man and reality. That's very interesting. It must
similar to two, isn't it, in a way?
Similar, but I think it's using the reasoning power somehow to let's say to reason man away from reality. And not just to mislead through attraction. See, second ray dweller offers a false vision. And here, the third ray type tells you all the reasons why reality cannot be so. Using the mind, the convincing mind. But there are some similarities, I agree. Sometimes when I look at Joseph Goebbels, I can't decide whether he was a manipulator of souls or a deluder of souls. I think in the last analysis, he was both, somehow. Telling the big lie, using incredible manipulation, but painting a totally false picture, which basically had a tremendous appeal, allure, and people wanted to buy into that and be part of that. So they were glamorously misled into his myths. He was a cinematographer, basically. He was a man who told a story. And he told it so convincingly, with such lies, that people wanted to be part of it. Hitler couldn't have done what he did without him. And DK said that the Black Lodge worked principally through Hitler and one other. I used to think it was Himmler, but now I think it's Goebbels. I think it's Goebbels. I think Himmler was just like a functionary. He didn't have the imagination. Although he did have a seventh-ray soul, I think, and he loved occult rituals. So he had his own method. Anyway, we use the mind, in other words, in this case, the mind, how would you say it? What's the old saying?
The mind is a slayer of the real.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It must be remembered that none of these names and these activities refer to the soul on its own plane, but to human souls in incarnation on the physical plane. So it's not the soul on its own plane, it's that thing that is a projection of the soul which is working within the personality. This must be stressed, for on its own plane the souls of all men stand free from illusion. But what this tells us is that the soul in incarnation becomes separated from the wisdom of the soul on its own plane. On its own plane. Yes. And neither can be destroyed, diluted, or manipulated. So basically people have lost touch with the source of wisdom and truth within them, and they become either the destroyer, the manipulator, or the deceiver, deluder. It is only the souls in prison, i.e. in incarnation, who are subject to the activities of the forces of evil, and only for a term. And the term, I think, connects with how long the dense physical body of the Solar Logos exists, because that's where the evil is done. In the dense physical body of the Solar Logos, only there. Once you get into the Buddhic and beyond, you're not going to have evil as we normally talk about it, except for one factor. That the home of cosmic evil, see, we're not talking about cosmic evil now, but the home of cosmic evil, the cosmic astral plane. So that's, since that's also the plane of pure love, how is it also the plane of cosmic evil? Well, these things are mysterious to us. And we're told that if you take the second path out of the solar system, you are led to the cosmic astral plane on the path of magnetic work, and then you start throwing streams of rose energy down into the astral plane of the solar system and clean it up with energy from the cosmic astral plane. If you're a fifth ray monad, it is often the method by which those monads achieve. So, there are a lot of paradoxes here. There is evil on the cosmic astral plane in a cosmic sense. But relatively speaking, the evil that is extending from the previous solar system is particularly focused in the dense physical body of the Solar Logos at this time. And he says only for a term, and I think when that dense physical body is made more ethereal by the progress of the Solar Logos, I think that evil will not have its same effect.
But Michael,
Yes.
the cosmic astral plane,
Yes.
isn't it a reflection of the Buddhic?
Of the cosmic Buddhic plane.
Cosmic Buddhic plane.
Yes. Yes.
So it is.
Yes.
It is not purity. And I'm wondering, why can we say that pure love is coming from that?
Well,
it's only a reflection of pure love.
It's relative. It's pure love for us,
Yes, for
I mean, maybe I can find it quickly, but for all practical purposes, what we call true love, pure love, is, he doesn't even talk about the cosmic Buddhic plane. But you're right, it is a reflection. Cosmic astral plane love. 19. Pure? I don't know. Cosmic God is love. God is pure being. Cosmic mental plane. Just as the energy of the second aspect comes from the cosmic astral plane, that's one. That level, as he knows, it prevents him from registering this energy of pure cosmic love. Pure cosmic love. And of course, you would be completely correct that it would even be a greater love on the cosmic Buddhic plane, but upon the cosmic astral plane there is no glamour, but instead a great vortex of energy, the energy of pure love. He says this kind of thing. He tends to say this kind of thing. But at the same time, the home of cosmic evil is particularly the cosmic astral plane. So maybe, we can try to figure that out. It's just mental. We have our own astral plane. It's meant to be a plane of love, and the Black Lodge has its home on our astral plane. So maybe there's a higher reflection. And the Black Lodge will be driven out by Buddhi or the Christ, be driven out of the systemic astral plane. But anyway, trying to move on here. The first group works through governments, through politics, and the interplay through nations, and is relatively small in number. The second group, who delude and deceive, and you could almost say they work with Neptune, work through religious agencies, through mass psychology, and the misuse and misapplication of devotion and of the arts. It's beginning to sound like Goebbels, They are the largest in number. The third group works primarily through commercial relations, business world, and through the use of money in the concretization of prana, or universal energy, and the outer symbol of universal flux. So they work through commerce, business, and money. And I would say that a lot of these types are active right now. We've got an economic system in a total mess, and you can't for a minute believe that some of these forces aren't behind the imbalances which are making things so economically difficult. These thoughts are suggestive but not vital, dealing as they do with cosmic tendencies. Okay, so what have we been talking about? The great illusion on the astral plane. So what was the first cause of the great illusion? Let's go back. What was it? Was a long time ago. The great illusion. Selfish desire. Okay, that was the first thing. Then what was the second cause? Boy, aren't we good? Okay, what was the second cause? Fear. Fear is the second cause, the force of fear. So, okay, and see if I can find it. Well, it maybe doesn't make any difference. So there it is. The force of fear. Okay. And now we come to the third cause of the great illusion. Let's see what it is. Sex. Let's see, so what was the first one? What? Selfishness. Whoa. Selfishness, fear, and sex. Okay. Gotta find it. Cyclic ebb and flow. Okay. Ambition, first-rate quality. Selfishness, fear, and sex attraction. Okay, let's read a little bit about it. Sex attraction. This is a pull from the physical plane, and a swinging back of a type of involutionary energy onto the path of return. It's really big now, too. It's the big commercial thing. You could say that the third-rate commerce and business is using this all the time. If you've ever walked in an airport, they force you to go through these places where they're selling a lot of perfume and cosmetics and booze and all the rest of it all together, and it's all sex. It's all there.
Advertising as well, big hoarding.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Advertising. That's it. That's what I mean. The advertising, the big images and so forth. They're using a lot of young people to basically institute a backward pull, a swinging back of this energy into the evolutionary path. Cosmically speaking, it manifests as the attractive force between spirit and matter. Spiritually speaking, it is demonstrated as the activity of the soul as it attempts to draw the lower self into full realization. Physically speaking, it is the urge to unite male and female for the purpose of procreation, When man was purely animal, no sin was involved. When to this urge was added emotional desire, then sin crept in, and the purpose for which the urge manifested was perverted into the satisfaction of desire. Well, our whole society is here. I mean, as a matter of fact, well, think of it. The birth rate is going down, down, down in the Western countries. Among the less democratic types, it's going up, up, up. And in these democratic countries, the sex is given to ego, emotional desire, and all the rest. While the birth rate goes down, it's a sure prescription for conquest, for being conquered. So this is one of the big problems, the demographics of the Western nations, and it's and it has arisen because of a fundamental self-indulgence, selfishness, basically. It is a very tough one, very tough. And I wonder whether our society will wake up. Will we wake up in time? That's a question. Now that the race is more mental and the force of mind is making itself felt in the human body, an even more serious situation is apparent, which can only be safely worked out when the soul assumes control of its triple instruments. So the mind and sex, see, not just emotion and sex, but minds, then the ego gets involved. So mind and sex involves the augmentation of the ego. And that is even more serious, I think. Humanity is now at the midway point. Okay, now we're getting back to the rule. At the midway point, and this rule, as this rule shows, man is swept by selfish desire, by ambition, for all of us have first-rate qualities. That's a good one, isn't it? It's important to take that in. All of us have these first-rate qualities. Man is swept by selfish desire, that was the first one, by ambition, and he is racked by fear. His own family fears, national fears, and racial. For all of us swing into the rhythm of the second rate. These are very universal statements. Sometimes when you're trying to ask, well, what are your rays and what are your rays? And you realize that you have the qualities of other people's rays and vice versa. This explains it. We all have all the rays. I remember when I talked to someone from the arcane school long ago, I think I was visiting England in 1987, and there was this guy there in arcane school headquarters. His name was Jim Bourne. We had a nice conversation. And he said, well, don't all of us have all the rays? And I thought to myself, geez, that's a cop-out. Because I was into this fifth-rate thing of discriminating everything possible. But in the last analysis, I think he was right. We all have all the rays. It's just a question of proportion, emphasis, And he is dominated by sex and money, which is another manifestation of the energy of matter, and hence has a triple problem with which he is well equipped to deal through the medium of his triple vehicle and the triple potencies of the divine soul, if he would exercise these potencies. Let us close the instruction on that note, well equipped to deal. This should instill confidence in us. In other words, he's saying we can overcome our problems. Although, DK said an interesting thing about the sex problem. He said, even the masters don't know where it will end. They don't know the outcome. It must be very serious, related to the earlier solar system and the third aspect and all of that. So, we can only say that thinking in terms of group good will somehow salvage these situations. In other words, we have to transit from selfishness to group good.
This is where a crisis as well is good.
Yes.
Because, it will take people's minds into survival mode.
Yeah, that's right.
And less into...
Yeah. They will become very resourceful. Although, I don't know, did you see that movie called The Book of Eli? It's got Denzel Washington in it, you know, that well-known black actor.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to tell you about it, but I've already seen it twice, and actually 3 times on the plane. And it's all about what happens 35 years after the last war. Not the last war, but the future war as the last war. When such a hole was burned in the atmosphere that the sun basically incinerated most everything. And when the people came out of hiding, it tells you what was left. And you see a possibility which is truly terrifying, but it has a happy ending. So, in other words, the same idea of human resourcefulness somehow triumphing over. It's a magnificent book with very deep philosophical and religious implications.
What's the name?
The Book of Eli. Book of Eli. I don't want to tell you about it, but it's really... it shows you how low you can go and how high you can go. And it's really...
In a strange way,
Eli, E-L-I.
Yeah.
E-L-I.
as leisure has increased and the need to till the soil and build and, the sex problem's got worse, hasn't it? So it's come with an increase of leisure.
Yes, an increase of leisure and a increase of mobility, increase of funds, and a decrease in spiritual values. So it's a serious thing. And if you were going to say, if the Hydra had only 3 heads instead of 9, sex would be the major one of the material heads. Fear would be the major one of the emotional heads, and this kind of devil head, pride, would be the major one of the mental. Pride, separativeness, and cruelty. Yeah, pride would be the major one. That's the devil pride. Okay. We can overcome mental inertia and begin to function as souls in command of our environment. The soul is omniscient and omnipotent. Now let us consider the words, the ebb and flow of the waters. The waters ebb and flow. The Agni-Syrians respond to the sound. The waters ebb and flow. In the understanding of the law of cycles, we gain knowledge of the underlying laws of evolution and come to a realization of the rhythmic work of creation. Well, we're told that in the new age, under Aquarius, the law of cycles will be very prominent, because Aquarius controls cycles, and we'll have quite a bit of mastery of the law of cycles under Aquarius. Incidentally, we also gain poise as we study our own life impulses, for they also have their ebb and flow and alternate between periods of light and periods of darkness. Gaining poise, we know when to act. We don't get into a fearful, impulsive response. We know what's happening. We have with us always that symbolic daily occurrence wherein the part of the world in which we live swings out of the clear light of the sun and later returns into the healing dark of night. How interesting. He's telling us something about that. He's telling us what happens at night. That a healing process occurs. Our very familiarity with the phenomena causes us to lose sight of its symbolic significance and to forget that under the great law, periods of light and dark, of good and evil, of submergence and emergence, of progress into illumination, and apparent betrayal into darkness. He's valuing the dark, too. Well, in the new schools, he values very much the dark half of the year where you do your creative work, where you work up everything you learned in the light half of the year. So it's very interesting, apparent betrayal into dark, because oh my goodness, the dark is coming. But he says it heals you, and it allows a rejuvenation, and so forth. So all of these things characterize the growth of all forms and distinguish the development of races and nations, and constitute the problem of the aspirant who has built for himself a picture of walking in a constant illumined condition and of leaving all dark places behind. So what is he saying here? We have to outgrow our distorted view of a of what do you call it? Non-cyclic glory. You know, it's like heaven. Oh, in heaven you're happy all the time, right? You go to heaven, there's different pictures of heaven, as you know. It's not all harps, and I remember seeing an Albert Brooks movie where in heaven you could eat all you want and never get fat. That's one view of heaven. Then there's those 72 virgins, they're there too. People make their own heaven, I think, according to the quality of their mind. Yeah, I told you about that. Oh, never mind. Okay, this is just... I ran into a horrible view of heaven. And in this view, your 71 wives were each kept in separate tents where they waited for you all day. What is day and night in heaven, I don't know. But they waited for you all day, and they never looked upon another man, but just waited for you to come home. Maybe you're off at your job in heaven, I don't know. They had see-through translucent skin. Their skin was so translucent that you could see their bones. This does not to me sound very appealing, but this particular sheik, who also wanted to kill Mickey Mouse, thought that this was a wonderful way to spend eternity. I kid you not. I have a video clip of him describing this heaven and the death of Mickey Mouse. Okay. So are we sane? Okay. In these instructions, it is not possible for me to deal with the ebb and flow of the divine life as it manifests in the various kingdoms of nature and through the evolutionary growth of humanity, through experiences and races, nascent families, etc., etc. It's a huge subject. I seek to elaborate somewhat, however, the cyclic experience of a soul in incarnation. I will be reading a little faster now, indicating the apparent ebb and flow of its unfoldment. Okay. The outstanding cycle for every soul is that of its forth-going into incarnation and its return or flowing back into the center from whence it came, and according to the point of view will be the understanding of this ebb and flow. It's according to, remember when we talked about the quality of the deva? Was that yesterday? The quality of the deva, of the solar angel, determined whether it wanted the light of experience or whether it wanted release from earth experience. You remember that? It was a day ago. Okay. Souls might esoterically be regarded as those seeking the light of experience and therefore turned towards physical expression, or those seeking the light of understanding and therefore retreating from the realm of human undertaking to forge, their way inward into the soul consciousness and so become dwellers in the light eternal. Does that make sense? Two types of souls, either extroverted or introverted. The extroverted soul is not the same as an outgoing person, you know what I mean? The consciousness is turned outward toward physical experience, and here, the other type, seeking the light of understanding. Where do we number ourselves? Obviously. Without appreciating the significance of the terms, the psychologists have sensed these cycles and called these types extroverts and others introverts. These mark an ebb and flow in individual experience over a long period of time, because it takes millions of years to change an extroverted soul into an introverted soul. Millions of years. As a matter of fact, you could spend, I suppose, you could spend 20 million years as an extroverted soul. And maybe you'll only have the last million or the last number of thousands being a truly introverted soul. So it's a long time of extroversion. In other words, the hall of ignorance lasts a very long time. The first petals of the egoic lotus, the first three, very, very long time, and the others faster as they unfold. And are the tiny life correspondences to the great soul cycles. Okay. This passing into and passing out of the web of incarnated existence are the major cycles of any individual soul. And the study of the types of pralaya dealt with in the secret doctrine, A Treatise in Cosmic Fire, would be found of real value to the student. Well, everybody has, a solar logoi, planetary logoi, let's just say the largest of all is what? Largest of these cycles is what? Is the universal cycle. The breath, the great breath. They call it the great breath. So that, extroversion and introversion of the great universal logos. Okay. There is an ebb and flow in soul experience on any one plane, and this, in early stages of development, will cover many lives. They are usually quite extreme in their expression. A study of the racial ebb and flow will make this clearer. In Lemurian days, the flow, or outward-going cycle, spent itself on the physical plane, and the ebb carried the life aspect right back to the soul itself, and there was no secondary ebb or flow on the astral and mental plane. See what I mean? It didn't stop. Just physical, because nothing is built up for the Lemurian to experience anything on the ebb cycle. Okay, so, and that's why maybe incarnations were quite frequent, because there was not a whole lot of time to be spending working anything up in the inner planes. Later, the tide broke on the shores of the astral plane, though including the physical in a lesser degree. The flow directed its attention to the emotional life, and the drift back to the center took no account of mental life at all, but you can be sure there was much, how can we say, astral life between incarnations. Probably a long time, because there was much to work out on the astral plane. Okay, this was at its height for humanity in Atlantean days, and is also true of many today. How many? 80% maybe. That's a lot. Now the ebb and flow is increasingly inclusive, and the mental experience has its place, so all three aspects are swept by the life of the soul. Only, for some people, let's just say, in the beginning, Lemurians are all physical and not much emotional or mental at all. Atlanteans are mostly emotional, a little physical, not mental. Aryans are mostly mental with a little emotional and physical, and maybe they try to round themselves out a bit. And, in the Aryan race, physical culture is also important. The emotions are a little bit suppressed. Okay. All are included in the outgoing energy of the incarnating soul, and for many lives, and a series of lives, this cyclic force expends itself. He's giving us strong hints about the nature of cycles. Within the aspirant there arises an understanding of what is going on, and he awakens to the desire to consciously control this ebb and flow. Or to put in simple words, to turn the forces of the outgoing energy in any direction he chooses, or to withdraw his energy at will. So, not forced to be mental, emotional, or physical, but to decide where he will focus. Now that's us, I presume. We do not want to be confined to any one of these planes. We want to come and go as we wish to. Okay. He seeks to arrest this process of being swept out into incarnation without having any conscious purpose. Now this tells us something about the soul in incarnation at first does not know the purpose of the solar angel in seeking incarnation. In other words, later, now, before you have an incarnation, you may know why you're having it. But in the early days, you, the soul in incarnation, swept out, just like a tide. Just swept on the tide, and the solar angel who's supervising the whole thing, it knows. But you don't know. And refuses to see the tide of his life beat out on emotional and mental spheres of existence, and then again see that life withdrawn without his conscious volition. He wants to die at will. He wants to be able to withdraw his consciousness out of the three worlds into the soul at will. That's where we are now. We want to be able to do this. In other words, it's perfectly possible for us, people like ourselves, to enter the world of the dead, to enter the world of the soul at will. But the average person does not have the choice to do this. We are waking up to the fact that we have the choice and we want to exercise our rights. He stands at the midway point and wants to control his own cycles, the ebb and flow, as he himself may determine it. With conscious purpose, he longs to walk in the dark places of incarnated existence, and with equally conscious purpose, he seeks to withdraw into his own center. Hence, he becomes an aspirant. What an interesting definition of an aspirant. Coming and going as you wish. Going out, coming in, comes and goes at will. No more drift, and I want to say this, no more being swept. And I read that yesterday about being driven up and down the land until Saturn gets a hold of you, anchors you, and you are no longer driven up and down the land. The life of the aspirant begins to repeat earlier cycles. DK has given so many hints in this thing. If a cyclist, someone studying cycles, really studied these pages very carefully, a lot of hints are being given as to the kind of cycles we pass through, how long they last, and so forth. But we just are reading it over more or less for general content. The life of the aspirant begins to repeat earlier cycles. He is assailed by a sudden stimulation of the physical nature and violently swept by ancient desires and lusts. I think this is so descriptive because this kind of word tells you that will is weak. Will is weak because will would resist the sweeping. How do you spell that? The sweeping action. He's swept by ancient desires and lusts. This may be succeeded by a cycle wherein the physical body is conscious of the flowing away from it of vital energy and is devitalized because not the subject of attention. This can all go on in the same life. Very heavy physical periods and very abstemious periods, all in the same life. But remember, the aspirant does not yet have control. The aspirant is not sufficiently will-focused to have control. This accounts for much of the sickness and lack of vitality of our most cherished servers. In other words, what's he saying, they are not paying attention to the body. And therefore, vitality goes away from what you do not attend to. The same process can affect the emotional body, and periods of exaltation and of highest aspiration alternate with periods of the deepest depression and lack of interest. This is the hill and valley experience of the mystic. It oftentimes is associated with Aquarius with its hills and valleys. Okay, so let's just put that in. Hill and valley of the mystic. Have you had this kind of thing in your life where you've been terribly excited and then followed by a period of depression and lack of responsiveness, even in the same day, perhaps? Could happen. Okay. The flow may pass on to the mental body and produce a cycle of intense mental activity. Constant study, much thought, keen investigation, and a steady intellectual urge will characterize the mind of the aspirant. So in the Moria Federation, we call this the light half of the year. At least that's the motto. To this may succeed a cycle wherein all study is distasteful and the mind seems to lie entirely fallow and inert. And actually we don't teach that part. That just happens to you. The second part of the year is not meant to be this way. I studied the first part of the year. I don't want to have anything to do with study. But he does say you should refrain from study for 6 whole weeks. And then your study is not the same kind, but it is refining and perfecting your ideas and working them into form during the dark half of the year. Okay. To this may succeed a cycle wherein all study is distasteful and the mind seems to lie entirely fallow and inert. I had this kind of experience, I think, for about 14 years. For 14 years I was swept by this musical urge. And it just went on and on and on, and one thing after another, music. And I finished writing The Return of the Christ, and it just stopped. I said, I just felt like I dried up. I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't have the flow wasn't there. It went away, and I got myself involved in other things except for finishing up, some music. It's a bit different. But I'm sure we've all had this experience of excitement and what follows the excitement, the ebb and the flow, in the same life. Now, many people don't have that because they're not at that rapid rhythm stage. An aspirant is already in the stage of rapid cyclic rhythm. Okay. So, aspirant has a rapid cycle. Now, maybe a disciple will not feel so much this, or at least he will keep that focused purpose and may not be so subject to these ebbs and flows. It is an effort to think of such times when the futility of phases of thought assail the mind. And then Dickey says, amazing thing here, the aspirant decides that to be is better by far than to do, and then he quotes, can these dry bones live? In other words, I'm so sick of studying. Can these dry bones live? He must be telling us about his own experience. Surely. And he has no desire to see them revitalized. Okay. Good. That was the cyclic ebbs and flows. Now we come to the point where we discuss the midway spot. The midway spot, which is neither dry nor wet, must provide the standing place whereon his feet are set. All true seekers after truth are conscious of this unstable experience and frequently regard it as a sin or as a condition to be strenuously fought. Then is the time to appreciate that the midway spot, which is neither dry nor wet, must provide the standing place whereon his feet are set, because the aspirant is either wet or dry. Right? I mean, dry, arid, dry. Dry is arid, and wet is, excited, whatever, stimulated. So we go through this period of, this is so fascinating, and then aridity. But in the middle is something else. Let's see what it is. This is a symbolic way of saying that he needs to realize two things. That states of feeling are quite immaterial and are no indication of the state of the soul. He says somewhere that not one thing which causes any pain or distress in the emotions matters in the very least. Do you recall running into that statement? Not one single thing which arises in the emotional vehicle causing any pain or distress matters in the least. Pain, distress, emotion matters. It leads him to assume the position that not one single thing which produces any reaction of pain or distress in the emotional body matters in the very least. I always find this a challenging hint to become dual in our view. These reactions are simply recognized, lived through, tolerated, and not permitted to produce any limitation. All disciples would do well to ponder upon what I've just said. The whole process is based on a deep-seated belief in the persistence of the immortal being within the forms of soul and personality. This is a very important statement. How to deal with our emotional fluctuations. And I oftentimes tell myself this when I'm going through something that should disturb me, so I think. And I say, not one single thing that rises in the emotional body matters in the very least. You know what I mean, gritting my teeth, whatever. But I'm sure we have to train ourselves to do this. To not be taken by the anger, by the repulsion, by the fear, by the anger. These things can oscillate. with distressing regularity until we say not one single thing. Okay. Feelings are not soul. That's what he's saying. So, what's this the practice of? We just talked yesterday. Dispassion. That's a dispassionate attitude which allows the growth of the vital power. Of the vital power. The aspirant must center himself in the soul consciousness, refuse to be influenced by the alternating condition to which he seems subjected, and simply stand in spiritual being, and then, having done all, stand. This is an ancient quote. Stand in spiritual being, and having done all, stand. This is the fourth ray method, by the way. You know how a life on the fourth ray can really be that way? You know how it can go? But he tells us that the fourth ray type can become, this is the word, steadfast. And stand in the center, and having done all, at least just to stand. At least that. And he tells us how this can be done. Okay, number 2. That the achievement of equilibrium is only possible where alternation has been the rule, and that the cyclic ebb and flow will continue just as long as the soul's attention fluctuates between one or other aspect of the form and the true spiritual man. So we need a non-fluctuating attention. The idea is the soul in incarnation should not be trapped by fluctuations. Okay. Fluctuations. Alright. The ideal is to achieve such a condition of conscious control that at will, a man may be focused in his soul consciousness or focused in his form aspect. At will. Each act of focused attention being brought about through a realized and specific objective necessitating such a focus for a reason. What you have here is a movable consciousness focused at will. In other words, your consciousness is not driven from one place to another. You change at will. Now, can we do that? Do you find you can do that? Or are you suddenly disturbed? Or can you choose, I won't be disturbed now, I'll be disturbed later, and continue with what you were doing? How are you when you lose something around the house? Are you good? Do you go on a hunt immediately for that lost object? Or do you systematically retrace your steps? Or do you say, oh, I'll take care of it later? What do you do? Panic. I mean, no. Stand. Yeah, well, you know what I mean. Master Moria says, just take a look at a man when he's lost something. He says he will be revealing a lot, you know. I had a friend, when I would lose something, this person would say to me, lost forever, you know, because obviously it would be found shortly. But my own attitude was generally to turn the house upside down until I found it. But maybe you are different. Maybe you just can allow an item to become lost without going through the panic of retrieval. Anyway, at will, you are not swept into a state of consciousness you don't want to be swept to. Like yesterday, never get angry except on purpose. I guess the Chinese would say never become happy except on purpose. Later, when the words of the great Christian teacher have significance, he will be able to say, whether in the body or out of the body is a matter of no moment. So St. Paul could obviously come and go the way he wanted. I'm here, I'm there, I choose to be where I want. I'm not forced to be any place. So you can change the scene. Or does it change on you? Can you change your scene, or does the scene change? Well, I'll tell you what, sometimes if you can't die deliberately, the scene will change on you. If you can die deliberately, you change your own scene. But the scene will change, and many of the scenes, as they change, we would have some control over. Every time we get into a mood, the scene has changed. Every time unwanted thoughts captivate our attention, the scene has changed. Do we have control over these changes? Hi. Hi there.
Getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. Okay. The act of service to be rendered will determine the point where the self is concentrated. You will not be driven up and down the land. You will say, I purposefully have to do this. Therefore I concentrate here. Or I concentrate there. Or concentrate there. You even go to sleep deliberately, says the Tibetan. Okay? I'm now going to go onto the astral plane. I fall asleep consciously. I change the scene consciously. Obviously this is going to take some doing, isn't it? Because DK says most people, when falling asleep, and you'll recognize the words, drift off. This is a bit like being swayed, being pushed, being, he's used these kinds of words already, where you're out of your control. Okay, so
Wake up at will.
What is it?
Most of us wake up at will if we've got something to do. You wake up at will, but
falling asleep
at will is more difficult.
It's hard because it seems to require a certain kind of concentration which does not affect the tension of the body. So if we can concentrate without making the body tense, we can probably do it. And then we will notice the scenes start to change, and he'll tell us all the different things that we will see as we don't drift off, but we hold a certain center within the head. So somehow this idea of drifting off is something to be fought. Not just in sleep, but how our, this is also like, it is like attention wandering. Without any will of your own. You just suddenly, you just pulled to some other place. Okay, so wherever the self will be concentrated, that's what we want. But it will be the same self, whether freed temporarily from the form consciousness or immersed in the form in order to function in different aspects of the divine whole. This is what he wants us to achieve. But how easily, it happens to all of us, we fall asleep involuntarily. So the whole thing is here is what do you do voluntarily, and what comes upon you involuntarily. Now, this is all about control, isn't it? And the whole magical process is really about control. Can we hold that focus and point of tension, which held allows the scene to change without us being swept away or drifting away from our held point of observation. Okay, so sweeping and drifting are involuntary acts. And we are training the will here. We are training the will. Okay. The spiritual man seeks for the furthering of the plan and to identify himself with the divine mind in nature. Withdrawing to the midway spot. Now, what DK is doing here, he's giving many different definitions of the midway spot, depending upon our level of evolution. Different definitions. He endeavors to realize his divinity from the midway spot. And then, having done so, he focuses himself in his mental form, which puts him en rapport with universal mind. Well, it's not going to be the cosmic mental plane, it's going to be triadal mind, from which creativity flows. He endures limitations so that thereby he may know and serve. He seeks to reach the hearts of men and to carry to them inspiration from the depths of the heart of spiritual being, Atma Buddhi. Again, he asserts the fact of his divinity. DK is tying together a lot of things. Because I assert the fact, what is that word of power? I assert the fact. What is that? He's tying many things together. Have you heard I assert the fact? What is that? It's one of the rays, isn't it? And what is it of the rays? It's the word of power when building the Antakarana for the first ray. I assert the fact. So again, he asserts the fact of his divinity, and then, through a temporary identification with his body of sensory perception, of feeling, and of emotion, he finds himself at one with the sensitive apparatus of divine manifestation, which carries the love of God. So basically, what he's telling us we can do is that we can focus in any of the lower vehicles and thereby attune with the higher vehicle which corresponds to the lower. So from the mind of God, from the astral body, the love of God, from the physical, probably it's going to be the activity aspect of God. And what is all this about? The midway spot, which is neither dry nor wet, must provide the standing place whereon his feet are set. In other words, you choose your own spot. That's what he's saying. You choose and you hold your focus. Choose your spot and hold your focus. Okay. Right. We'll make it. Again, he seeks to aid in the materializing of the divine plan on the physical plane. Now he's going to focus there. He knows that all the forms are product of energy rightly used and directed. With full knowledge of his divine sonship and a potent mind realization of all that that term conveys, he focuses his forces in the vital body and becomes a focal point for the transmission of divine energy, and hence a builder in union with the building energies of cosmos. So what's this all about? What are we talking about here? Movable focus of attention. That's what he wants us to have. Wherever we want to go, as a matter of fact, the whole universe is right here and now. It's not somewhere else, it's all here. And according to the focus of your attention, but that's not enough, the intensity of your intention, so the different scenes will appear. If I change my focus and change the intensity of my point of tension, the different aspects of the universe will appear before me. And I will never have to move. Now, that is if I'm God, right? Does God move? God. Where's there to move to? Does the universal God, who is the life of the entire universe, move? Within God there is movement, but does God move? No. See, in a way, that point of tension is held throughout the duration of an entire universe, and if God wants to go somewhere within himself, he sends out an emanation. That's how God moves. He holds his place, its place, whatever, and moves into the other aspects of himself by changing the quality and intensity of his focus. An emanation is nothing but a change of focus. Well, I developed these ideas in the Infinity book, but basically God moves and doesn't move. He always holds his center, but goes out into his own illusory nature by extending a part of his consciousness into that illusory nature. I don't want to get into that too much, but there's a psychological way in which you can understand that this is happening. God knows the whole, but wills to narrow his focus so that only a part becomes visible. That is called emanation. Sanat Kumara, the planetary logos, knows the whole planet, but the planetary logos focuses on a part of the planet through Sanat Kumara. It is still himself, but it's a narrowed focus.
But we do the same.
We do the same. We can do the same. We will do the same. Yeah. We have a generalized awareness and we can focus particularized attention. What we're not too good at yet is focusing with equal clarity in 10 places at the same time, but multitasking can take us there.
But the soul is doing it when we incarnate.
Yes, the soul is holding its own attention and putting an aspect of itself down. Exactly. The soul in incarnation is the soul. Yeah, and that's what the monad is doing. Well, anyway, what can we get out of this? Change our focus at will in the life of the aspirant and control your own cycles. That's what he's telling us. Okay. He carries the energy of illumined thought and sanctified desire down into the body of ether and so works with intelligent devotion. So he's telling us what we, the consciousness, can do and where we can focus. Now, this is a good section. You ask for a clearer definition of midway spot. He must have heard the thoughts of his readers. Please, Master, how about really defining this term? For the probationer, it is the emotional plane, the Kurukshetra, or the plane of illusion, where land and water, the land physical nature and water emotional nature meet. It is the emotional plane. That's the midway spot. He defines it this way. For the disciple, it is the mental plane where form and soul make contact and a great transition becomes possible. The dotted line on the mental plane. Now he discriminates further. Which is your midway spot? We're going to meditate on this tomorrow. For the advanced disciple and the initiate, the midway spot is the causal body. Are we there yet? Okay, see what I mean? He tells us the reason for the failure in meditation is because disciples cannot focus in their causal body. So that's the midway spot. The Karana Sarira, the spiritual body of the soul, standing as the intermediary between the spirit and matter, life and form, the monad and personality. This can be discussed, also be discussed and understood in terms of the centers. So the midway point depends on the status of the meditator. What is your midway spot? Now, there is a technical midway spot at which the magician is supposed to stand when controlling his energies on the physical plane, and that is in the ethers of the head. But now he's elaborating on the idea of midway spot. Now it keeps on going. I imagine that the soul is a midway spot. Probably for some consciousnesses, the triad is a midway spot. Probably for some, the monad becomes a midway spot. When they start getting monadic group consciousness. Okay.
Midway spot and the point of tension.
Yes. Let's define it that way.
Could we talk a little bit?
We can. A midway spot is a particular point of tension which focuses in a particular dimension. And so we need to know what our point of equilibrium really is. What is that for us? What is the midway spot? We'll deal with that tomorrow. As every student knows, there are two centers in the head. One center is between the eyebrows and has the pituitary body as its objective manifestation. The other is in the region of the top of the head, the region, he's not too specific, and has the pineal gland as its concrete aspect. Now this is very interesting, and I told you about this earlier. The pure mystic has his consciousness centered at the top of the head almost entirely in the etheric body. The pure mystic. The advanced worldly man is centered in the pituitary region. This gets very technical. When through occult unfoldment and esoteric knowledge, the relation between the personality and the soul is established, there is a midway spot in the center of the head, in the magnetic field, which is called the light in the head. And it is here that the aspirant takes his stand. So the aspirant, aspirant, we stand within the light in the head. This is the spot of, now here's DK playing with words, this is the spot of vital import, vital. And it is related to the vital power that we've been talking about, this midway spot. It is neither land or physical, nor water or emotional. It might be regarded as the vital or etheric body which has become the field of conscious service, of directed control, and of force utilization for a specific end. So, when you are focused in your midway spot, technically understood, what do you have? You have here conscious service, you have force utilization, you have, what's the other one? Has become the field of conscious service. Directed control. Directed control. These are the things we do when we are focused in the midway spot in the ethers within the head. Now, we did a little bit of that this morning, a little bit, and tomorrow in our meditation we will do more of that. Okay. Hence the magician takes his stand and through the medium of his force or energy body performs the magical creative work. The magician is in his 7th body, and the physical body is his 8th sphere. He's in his 7th body. In many ways, our dense physical body is the 8th sphere. It has a number of definitions. HPV gives a very gruesome definition, but also this shell is the 8th sphere. Okay. One point is rather obtrusely dealt with in this rule, but is clarified if the words are studied with care. At the close of the rule, we are told that when land and water meet, there is the place for magic to be wrought. Curiously, in these ideas, the idea of location is omitted, and only the time equation is considered. Although, frankly, the word there does suggest place, but when is even bigger. At that state of development when land, water, and air meet, magic can be wrought. And here we go with what we were talking about in those protective mantrams involving air. Air is the symbol of the Buddhic vehicle, of the plane of spiritual love, and when the 3 above enumerated in their energy aspects meet, it is indicative of a focusing in the soul consciousness and a centralization of the man in the spiritual body. So this is very interesting. It means, in a way, there is a Buddhic focus as well as a etheric focus in the head. Both. From that point of... Now, this is so interesting because we're going to do this tomorrow morning, just to get a little advance on it. From that point of power outside the form, that's the Buddhic vehicle, from the central sphere of unification, which is the soul, and from the focus point within that circle of consciousness, which is, I want to call it, the jewel in the lotus, where we have 3 things. A point of power outside the form, the central sphere of unification as the causal body, the focus point within that circle of consciousness. The spiritual man projects his consciousness into the midway spot within the brain cavity where the magical work must, in relation to the physical plane, be carried out. So that is really a formula. We've been given a formula here. A very powerful magical formula for doing work in the center of the head. Okay, the unification and thence into the cave. Okay. The ability to project the consciousness from the plane of soul realization into that of creative magical work on the etheric subplanes is gradually made possible as the student in his meditation work develops facility in focusing his attention in one or other of the centers in the body. So, what does this mean? Practice moving your attention from one chakra to another. And as we do that, we gain the facility to move our point of consciousness outside the chakra system altogether, and into the jewel in the lotus and even above. So DK has expanded on the idea of moving the point of consciousness at will. This is an expansion on the idea of moving the point of consciousness, path of occultism, point of consciousness at will. This is accomplished through the medium of the 4 centers in the etheric body. He gradually gains, this is so beautiful, really important, he gradually gains that plasticity and that fluidity of the self-directed consciousness which will enable him to play on the centers as a musician utilizes the 7 notes of music. This is a brilliant conclusion all for a purpose. So very important things are being said here about how to control our mechanism. And when this has been achieved, he can begin to train himself in wider and more extended focusings, and must learn to withdraw his consciousness not only to the brain, but to the soul on its own plane. The lower light is thrown upward, and the greater light illuminates the three. And thence redirect his energies in the performing of the magical work of the soul. So basically you go up and you come down. And all of this requires practice, practice, practice. You know, seventh ray, practice. Okay.
The third is easy reach, and the fifth is dominant.
The third is reached, and the fifth. Where does it say that? Here? Oh, yes.
Read that in Copy 5.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Dum da dum bum bum bum. That's the third. The third is reached, perfected personality. Dum bum 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 bum. That's the fifth. That's the dominant. That's the soul.
Yes.
Bum. And the monad. Okay, it's all spelled out for us in the ABCs of music. Well, I'll tell you what. Oh, this is so good. This is so good. But I don't want.
It's a little bit fast.
What is it?
It's a little bit too fast.
Yes, I know. I'm talking so fast that even I can't understand me. You know, I want to invite you back after dinner. But I'll tell you what.
You can continue tonight.
Well, I want and I don't want.
See? We've called you out now.
I'll tell you what.
You're good at moving your focus.
I'll tell you what, though. I'll tell you what. Yes. I'll tell you what. Yes. I regret to say it, but this is so good, and it's necessary. It's necessary for our meditation tomorrow. So what I would like to do is have a brief supper, not too leisurely, don't enjoy yourself too much, and then come back here for, I don't know, 45 minutes. Something like that. Is anybody planning to go home? You have to go home, right. Well, you have to do what you have to do. But it's now 6:10, so I don't want to keep pounding on this, but I have a feeling that if we were to be able to read this little bit a little more, because we're getting the idea. See, I drew a line here. I probably ran into trouble with one of the other courses and had to draw a line. But you are much more diligent than the others. They would never come back. But I know that all of you will come back, even if you have to be carried back or dragged. And we will have just a short re-exposure to this, so we can use this for our meditation tomorrow.
Well, that's important.
Okay, so have a very nice dinner, and let's meet at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for being so kind and agreeing to come back. And if Mimi hadn't said what she said, I would never have had you come back. But Mimi having said what she said, I had to rise to the challenge. Thank you, Mimi.